evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Hartwig, and I am the host of the Dirt Trail Running Podcast. And I'm also a race director of Kettle Moraine 100, the Hennepin 100, and a bunch of other Midwest-based trail races. Crystal the Pistol is my co-host, and we love all things trail running.
Hey everyone, we are live, YouTube live. So if you're watching and you have any questions throughout the show, type them in and we will get them asked for you.
So tonight, our guest is Coach Jason Koop, and he is the author of Training Essentials for Ultra Running, the host of Koop Cast podcast, and the coach to a bunch of our favorite athletes like Corey Woltering and Casey Lichtig. And we are looking forward to getting to know him better. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
So you said you just got done traveling, so you unpacked everything. Where were you came from? Chicago area today?
I literally got back at 6:30 Mountain Time. I got back at 5:30 Mountain Time, so I haven't even been back for that long.
Oh, that was. So where were
Yeah,
you at? What were you doing?
I was in Vermont. One of my athletes was attempting FKT on the Long Trail in Vermont, which runs from the Canadian border down to the southern border of Vermont. It's 271 miles, really hard trail. It shares a lot of the Appalachian Trail in the southern part. And so I drove out there. I've got this converted Ford Transit van that I use for athlete support and adventuring and things like that. So I drove out there, supported her, paced her during this FKT attempt, and then I've been gradually making my way back over the course of the past few days. And ironically enough, I got to sit down and have a beer with Corey and go do a run with Casey. So those two
Oh, fun.
I've seen them personally in the last 2 days.
Well, yeah, Corey is local to us. He's been on our show before. And, Casey, everybody loves her, of course, like the kindest person of ultra running. So, how lucky is that?
That is correct. Both of those two individuals are great human beings, and I'm very fortunate that I get to work with them.
Yes. So to start out, getting to know you, we kind of wanted to go back to your beginnings in running and kind of hear where you came from. A quick, brief, story of that.
Well, I think that story shares a lot of commonality with runners. Is I grew up in Texas and initially was drawn into a lot of the team sports, like any good Texan, playing football, basketball, and things like that. And through the conditioning drills, I figured out that I was a pretty decent endurance athlete because I could win all the conditioning drills, but I wasn't, the most athletic person on the team. And so that drew me into triathlon and running, and I ran in high school, college at Texas A&M, and moved out to Colorado Springs, Colorado after I graduated, and took a job at the time with a company called CTS, who I still work for. I've worked for 20 years, and took a job as a coach there as a remote-based endurance coach when really there was no such thing. And I've always described it as one of those jobs that I couldn't explain what I was doing to my mother for like the first 10 years that I did it. And now I can kind of sort of explain it. But certainly when I first started doing this in 2001, Strava didn't exist, the tools really weren't there, and everybody thought of a coach as their high school basketball coach with a clipboard and that attended all the practices and things like that. And the concept of having a coach that wasn't located in the same area that you were and very rarely saw you and could use remote based technology to guide the training into gather information on what the training process looks like and what the athletes are doing at the time was quite novel. And so I've been doing that ever since. I'm very lucky to say that I've had the same job, same career for the last 20 years.
So when did you you talked about being an athlete as a kid, and you basically you went right into coaching as your job. Like, what was it that that made you know that coaching was the right direction for your life?
Well, once again, I was really fortunate that my summer track club coach, his name's Tom Clark, who had a really big influence on me when I was a very young athlete. He gave me way too much responsibility as a 15 and 16-year-old, where I would run the practices for our youth track and field club. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I would take these kids through standard track and field drills. I'd design the workouts, I'd design the practices, I'd take them to the meets, I'd run them through their meets, I'd, make sure that they met up with their parents afterwards. And I had no business and no level of maturity to actually handle that. But somehow, because I'd known Tom for so long and I'd run underneath him for so long, he trusted me or he entrusted me with that responsibility for that team. And it was really through that process where I really grew to appreciate coaching. And it was largely based on the improvement that I could get out of the athletes. For whatever reason, I was just very drawn to seeing that process unfold. And as you can imagine, with kids, the kids age ranges from anywhere from like 7 to 17. That improvement unfolds very rapidly. I mean, I could take a kid that didn't know how to long jump, and by the end of the day, we've got their steps down, they'll hit the board, they'll get into the pit, maybe they can kind of control their landing a little bit, all in one day. And then they come back the next day and we get even more improvement. They jump even further, their run up looks even better, they're actually getting close to the board versus very far behind the board. And seeing that improvement curve unfold so fast was just really fascinating to me. And so I started coaching then, really at 16. And honestly, I didn't have an outlet for it when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I just didn't, outside of coaching in that youth track and field setting, there was really no opportunities for one to even become a coach that were outside of the collegiate coaching system. It really didn't exist to a large extent. So, but it was all based on that initial experience with this youth track and field club called the Texas Stars. That, like I said, it was just one of those things that I stumbled into and I just really enjoyed.
So your book Trail Running is Essential. It came out around 2016, and I feel like it was a book that was a game changer for ultra running. I had a coach around 2012 era, and my coach would tell me that there wasn't a lot of information out there for her to learn. So we were experimenting on me, and some stuff worked and some stuff didn't work. And your book came out and taught people. I feel like Dean Carnaz's book came out and taught people to try to run trails, and then your book came out and told people how to actually race them and do it well and get better. So it was a real game changer in ultra running. Is that when you start? And your expert to me seems to be in ultra running. Did you start working with ultra runner athletes after that book, or was it before?
It was before, but I'd been coaching for several years before I could get anybody to take any interest whatsoever in trail and ultra running. And the anecdote that you mentioned is exactly why the book got written. I first started when I first started remote based endurance coaching. I kind of coached everybody. I coached triathletes and cyclists and mountain bikers and runners and marathoners, and you kind of name it. But there was this one niche that, for whatever reason, coaching just didn't resonate with them, and that was trail and ultra runners. And it wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, I reached out to several of the top trail and ultra runners at the time in kind of the early to mid 2000s, because I could see what they were doing, and I realized that they were making a lot of training mistakes, and those training mistakes are a result of the process that you mentioned, where it's this innumerable trial and error based off of ends of ones and anecdote that gets passed down from person to person to person. And these elite athletes were going through that same process, and I could look at it just from an observational point of view and say, they're making a lot of mistakes. So I'd reach out to these elite athletes and say, hey, let me help you out. I just want to do something that's good for the sport. I'm not going to charge you anything, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really, it was very bizarre at the time because I not only got 100% no's on that, and I'm not talking like one or two or three people. I'm talking, I'll just leave it at several. It was a lot. I didn't get just 100% no's. I kind of got laughed at the time, like, oh, this coaching thing and trail and ultra running is stupid. We don't need coaches, blah, blah, blah. And I gave up trying to work with that market because I already had a established coaching business and other endurance sports. And for whatever reason, over the next 7 years or so, it just kind of gradually turned around to where now we see it today, and it's a quote unquote thing, right? I mean, a lot of people have coaches. You have a coach. You've had several runners on this podcast that have had coaches as well, and it's becoming more and more common. But it did not start out that way, and I can profess to that, having lived through it and lived through all of the no's and getting laughed at.
What do you think was the biggest mistake that you saw people making that was
There's
even
too much
uh,
volume. Yeah, but by far it's just too much volume. It's volume is the key. We're going to go run as until our legs fall off. Very little focus on intensity, and then also a lack of and this is hand in hand with the volume problem, is also a lack of organization, where they're just not thinking about their training program from a 12-month lens. They're thinking about it from what do I need to do to get ready for the next race. So it's race to race to race to race instead of broadening the lens out. And once again, it was very clear to me because I'd been working with all of these different types of athletes that already had these relatively routine and standardized procedures in place and training protocols in place and things like that that were universally accepted across the board. And for whatever reason, trail and ultra runners just didn't think that those applied to them. I could very easily see all those mistakes being made, but I couldn't convince. Maybe I'm just not a very good convincer or salesperson. I just couldn't convince anybody to take me up on the offer.
who was your first athlete that took you that finally said yes? Okay, I'm gonna listen. That I'll try this.
This is a really good story. It's and he would not mind me mentioning this by name or giving any of the other details. It's somebody by the name of Jim Huffman. And if you were around in the early 2000s, you'll recognize that name because he was really good. He was fourth at Western States 1 year, and he was second at Wasatch 3 years in a row behind Carl Meltzer. And his whole goal, and Carl would appreciate me telling this story as well. I was just over at his house a couple of weeks ago, so he knows the deal. I'm not, divulging anything that's not public knowledge or we all can't laugh at in retrospect. But Jim's whole goal was to beat Carl at Wasatch. And the reason that he hired me as a coach was as an end to that mean, or as a means to that end. And he worked really hard to do it. Didn't quite get it done. Carl's a tremendous athlete, obviously, and not a lot of people, especially during that time, was gonna beat Carl Meltzer in a 100-mile race, especially at Wasatch. But he was the first one that kind of turned the tide. But still, even then, it was really quiet. It honestly really didn't take off until another athlete that I worked with that was just, we were connected just via mutual friends, and he took a little bit of a leap of faith with me working on him. Was when Dakota Jones won Transvulcania and en route beat Killian Jornet. And I don't profess to know what the magic concoction of the situation is or the situation was around that. But when that happened, that singular moment happened, for whatever reason, I had to start beating people away with a stick. So I went from getting laughed at, I mean, literally from 1 week to the next, getting laughed at, to the floodgates in a very proverbial sense. I don't, I'm not exaggerating this at all, to the floodgates absolutely being open. I had to hire more coaches, and my own coaching load got filled up, and I didn't get rid of, but I gradually moved away from coaching all of these other sports because it was a supported thing. That one singular moment, for whatever reason, and it continues to resonate in terms of people being attracted into trail and ultra runners, at least being attracted into the proposition of being coached.
Do you have I'm looking for a story of a moment of pride that you want to share about one of your athletes. It doesn't have to be an elite, like maybe somebody that really committed and followed your directions and then did something that was just much bigger than they ever expected they could do. Yeah, I think that my purpose is we really like to encourage people to realize that they can do this and these goals are reachable. So, do you have any stories that would help people with that?
Yeah, it's tough to pinpoint one, but I'll give you one that the end of the tale has not been written yet. And this is an athlete that I work with that's in the Midwest, and she has been training to finish the Leadville Trail 100 for the last 6 years, and has not gotten the job done. Some years she's get closer than others, and in general, the trend line is kind of closer and closer and closer. But she keeps getting better, and she keeps going back to the well and training and putting her head down and getting better every single day and making it a more and more reasonable proposition so that she does get it done. I'm still betting on her to do it, whether that's 2021 or 2022 or 2023 or whatever, and I'll stick it out with her until the end and do whatever I can, within my power to get her to that Leadville Trail 100 finish line. But this notion of you tried something and you failed at it for 6 years and you keep going back to it, those are the things that honestly, as a coach, like those give me a lot of glimmer of pride, because they're doing it for the right reasons at that point. It's easy when people are winning. It's easy. And I've coached a lot of people that have won a lot of races and a lot of athletes that have had PRs and things like that. That part of it's easy. It's easy to celebrate and give everybody high fives and tell them they're awesome and all that other stuff. It's not easy when things aren't going right. And when things aren't going right and you've had this big goal for 6 years, and you can still like keep your nose to the grindstone and still appreciate the process, and they still have value in the coach athlete relationship. Those are the things that I think are the most meaningful to me. It's the longevity piece of it.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. How so we're in a pandemic, and you talked about how a big mistake was everybody like overtrains and does too much. Do you think that with all the races being canceled, that we're gonna when they start opening back up, that athletes aren't going to be so overtrained and they're going to come out and just start killing, setting some course records and stuff?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would take that bet one way or the other in Vegas, nor do I care to really handicap it. What you're referencing was a tweet that I kind of cheekily put out the other day, because overtraining is this thing in trail and ultra running that, very unfortunately, so it gets thrown around a lot, kind of in the wrong context. And the fact of the matter is, we can get into this a little bit more if you want to, it's almost impossible to truly overtrain, where the training, and you have to think about the vocabulary that we're using, where the training is the over component of it. There is too much training, and training alone. You can be over fatigued or under rested or overstressed, but overtraining, I can go down to the Olympic Training Center, which is just a couple of miles from me, where they have the best athletes in the world of all different sports that have an unlimited amount of time to train and all of the best recovery tools and every bell and whistle imaginable. They will have very, very few, if any, people overtrain in a single year. It's almost impossible. So my point with that commentary is that if everybody really is overtrained, then everybody should crush 2021 once the races come back. That's probably not that likely to happen. We'll probably see some good performances because some athletes, they have longer of a buildup, but other people, and we've seen this play out with our colleagues and people we follow on Strava and things like that. Other people have kind of just completely shut it down and said, you know what, I don't have anything to train for. I'm going to do the minimum 3 days a week. And that's going to catch up to people as well. And those people might be the ones that are injured more often in 2021, because they brought their training load down so much, and then they try to cram for whatever race kind of comes around the corner. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that at the end of the day. It'll probably be a mixed bag of everything, just like anything else.
Well, what would be a smart way for people to use this time of no races?
I've written about this a little bit before. I think if you take 10% off of the table, just as a rule of thumb, 10% of your training volume, 10% of your volume at intensity, 10% off of your long runs, whatever, that just makes the whole training process that more sustainable. You're really not going to lose that much fitness. You can continue to stay engaged in the training process. And then once the this dim light starts becoming more luminous at the end of the tunnel, once that starts to happen, you're not crawling out of such a big hole that you ramp up too quickly, too much too fast, or it takes too long to ramp up and you're in a place where you're severely undertrained for a race. So with a lot of the athletes that I've been working with that have this extremely ambiguous, what's next on the calendar, I've been just generally taking 10% off. But I'll tell you what, I personally, I can't profess to everybody out there, but personally, I've been pretty successful with getting my athletes involved in other projects. So whether it's a virtual last person standing race or an FKT style event, like I was just at, or something that some like personal challenge that they can contrive or whatever, I've been very good. My athletes have been very good about getting into those things and remaining engaged, and at the same time ensuring that those types of alternate activities are still meaningful. They're not just one trick ponies. So they'll do something, they'll do one thing over here, another thing over there, and there's still like some connection to the whole process.
Yeah, when I worked with a coach, it was really important for her to get me to focus on something, and I think that the virtuals and the FKTs helps keep you consistent and focused and with a goal ahead. It's hard to just randomly wake up and not know what you're working towards. So I think
Yeah,
that's great.
I don't know. I mean, I I had this conversation with Casey when I was running with her a couple of days ago. Like, we do see the people that are event driven versus more process driven. And the people that are event driven are the ones they're really trying to grasp at straws for things to do. They're trying to, just find anything, and they don't like the virtual race over here, then they try this other contrived thing over there, and then they do the Goggins challenge and things like that. The ones that are more process driven, and I've been a lifelong runner, and I've always been a process driven person, and for whatever reason this resonates with me more. I get up and I run, and that's my thing. And there are a lot of athletes that don't need a goal at the end of the line to really fuel them. They'll get the work done irrespective of kind of what's in front of them. So I see both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I think that with a goal though ahead, there is there that is a little process driven because I like looking at, okay, well I'm building up, this is where I'm working on speed, this is where my taper is, and I really enjoy that part of it, and with like an FKT, but I suppose not so much with a virtual would be like that.
Well, when you have something at the end of the tunnel, the honestly the catalyst that it really helps with is organizing the training. So when you have this, okay, I'm going to do this one thing, you can say, okay, before that, I need to do this training block. And then before that, I need to do this other training block. And before that, which is now or whatever, I need to do this. So it helps you organize and kind of systematize what you're going to actually do, which drives what you were mentioning, speed work here and hills there, and this type of work there. And then I'm going to do my long run and blah, blah, blah. The races help, the races help solidify that whole process of what you are going to actually do. And really what I've seen a lot with the process driven people that don't have these races at the end of the calendar, they still do hard workouts, they still do long workouts and things like that. They just do it in a completely random haphazard order, which is fine. They're still going to improve from that. It might not be the most like logical sequence in the world, but they're still going to make some type of improvement out of it once this whole thing is said and done.
So with COVID, I don't know about you. I'm guessing we all see on Facebook the trails full of lots of new people I feel like new people are finding ultra running. If you had, and that's great. I'm so glad that we have new people coming to the sport. So if you had 5 minutes with a new ultra runner and you wanted to help get them going in the right direction, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to get their nutrition program in order.
Do you coach
That would take more
nutrition?
than five. That would take way more than 5 minutes, though. As concise as I can put that, I would do that.
Yeah. What kind of suggestions for like just a short where should they go look for resources on that?
Well, training essentials for ultra running, of course. I have a whole chapter on how to design your race day nutrition program. Yeah, honestly, that is a good resource. It's one of the reasons that I wrote that is because the resources, I wasn't really satisfied with the resources out there. I Run Far does a really good job of bringing together like different authors for various topics. I steer a lot of both experienced and newer runners towards that site because you can search for things as well. And if you want to learn about something, as quote unquote elementary as what shoes to pick out versus something as advanced as how do I fix this injury, typically you can find that on that website. They've done a very good job of curating that content over the last several years. But it always comes with newer athletes. It always comes down to nutrition. And if I really wanted to like consolidate the elevator pitch down into something that's like less than 5 minutes, is that your training is really not all that different from marathon training. So if you're used to marathon training, there's going to be something, yeah, okay, you're going to run a little bit longer over here, maybe a little bit less intensity, a little bit more volume, but it's not double. And I think a lot of marathon runners get intimidated at the prospect of doing a 50 mile or a 50K because they think that they need to double their training. Okay, I did a 20-mile long run for my marathon, so I need to do a 45-mile long run or a 40-mile long run in order to do a 50-miler. And that's just not necessarily the case. And in fact, I can get away, depending upon the situation, with a person who goes between a marathon and a 50K or 50-mile with very little changes in the overall volume. It's just the architecture of the rest of the work that changes the most.
Your athlete Corey Woltering that you just got done seeing, obviously, he's from right by here, and he just got done doing the FKT on the Ice Age Trail, and we were wondering how you prepared him before he tackled that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what I'll tell you what I told him before he went out there, because he said the same thing. He's like, how in the world am I going to get ready for this? And I said, listen, these big long FKTs like this, they're far more about lifelong training than they are about what you can do in the last few weeks or even few months, because it's so long and so hard that, yeah, we can put training stress on an athlete in the last 8 weeks or whatever, but it's just a teeny tiny fraction of their overall training volume. So that's what I try to get him to focus on. Is it's not the last few weeks of training, it's the entirety of training that he's done ever, like even going back to his triathlon days, that's going to matter the most. And just the way it all unfolded, he honestly didn't have that much time to do it. I mean, I think I would have to go back and check my notes to confirm this exact timing, but it might have been 4 or 6 weeks between when he decided to do the FKT and when it actually started. And it's all a complete byproduct of everything that's been going on with COVID, because he kept getting into races and he wanted to qualify for Western States, and this race got canceled, and you got to enter this race, and then that got canceled, and then support for whatever other project he was doing got altered or whatever. So he honestly didn't have that much time to get ready for this thing. He was forced into a situation where he just had to do it.
Did you get to talk to him every day while he was out there?
Oh no. Oh my gosh, no way. I stayed the heck out of the way and sent him a couple of nice text messages, or filtered some things, or tried to filter some things through his crew. I mean, I've been on enough of those projects that I know that the athlete needs to be disturbed as little as possible. Like he's got the support he needs out there. If shit really hit the fan, he could reach out to me and help like triage something, or his crew could reach out to me and help triage something. But I was not getting in the way of anything there, trying to offer him any advice on, pacing or anything like that. Because I mean, once again, he knows best. He's the athlete. He's the one that's kind of like living in the moment. And at the end of the day, he's the person that's kind of put one foot in front of the other. Like, what am I going to do here from Colorado Springs? I'll just give him a, yeah, attaboy, good job. Like, you're kicking butt. I will say that towards the end, when I knew he was behind a little bit, I gave him some just like text message type of encouragement, because I know that he wanted it so bad, and I know that he could do it, and I knew that he had enough time based on the math. But outside of that, like I said, I tried to stay the heck out of the way, which is normally my MO at a race, is I try to stay the heck out of the way.
That's interesting. When did you and Corey start working together, and how did that happen?
It honestly hasn't been that long. Maybe 6 months or something like that. And he just reached out to me out of the blue. Um, and yeah, I mean, who am I to say no? I was thrilled at the opportunity, because I obviously knew him from his, not only his Speedo reputation, which I think gets a little bit too much of the spotlight gets put on that, because he really is a great human being, and he's a good person and a great athlete, and he has a lot of like quirky side as well, which comes out in this, which comes out in the Speedo thing. But I was obviously aware of who he was beyond the Speedo story, and I was just thrilled to work with him when he asked me to.
Oh, that's cool. He ran with the Speedo story. He ran our Frozen Gnome race. You might have seen pictures on social media of that. It was like probably like 0 degrees, and he wore his Speedo, but he ran so fast he wasn't cold.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. What more guts than I would have to in those types of conditions, for sure.
So we tend to have a lot of new runners that are listening, and we want to get people headed in the right direction. We want healthy ultra runners here in the Midwest. And I'm a huge believer of coaches. I wish everybody could experience trails, and I wish everybody could have a coach. For our listeners, how would you suggest somebody goes about getting a coach? What questions do you ask them?
Well, I just happened to release a podcast about this a few weeks ago. So you can go to the podcast, which you already plugged, and I'll shamelessly plug again. Yes, and there's one there where I actually speak to. We have an athlete services director, which is just a fancy name for head of sales. You would hate it if I called him that, but that's what it is. He plays matchmaker between coach and athlete, and so I interview him about that whole process. I encourage athletes to interview as many coaches as they feel comfortable with, because the landscape is such now that, and I keep track of this a lot, just being in the industry for so long, not just in trail running, but also in cycling and triathlon. I kind of keep a close ear to as well. The landscape is such that there are a lot of differences between coaches, and everybody's in coaching for the right reasons. Nobody's going to become a zillionaire from coaching. Nobody's trying to scam anybody with coaching or anything like that. But there are big differences from one coach to the next, from a lot of different perspectives, from personality, from the service delivery, from how they act, what their actual coaching philosophy is, to what athletes they work well with and what athletes they don't work well with. And the best way for an athlete to get a fix on that is just to start calling people, making contacts, and interviewing people. I encourage athletes to get some of like the kind of the behind the scenes information out of the coach. So normally when you have a conversation with a person, you'll figure out if you click with them irrespective of the questions that you ask. You'll know if you like the person, you get along with them, you get a sense for their personality. Doesn't matter what you ask them. So I encourage athletes to ask the coach, how many athletes do they work with? How much time do they spend coaching? And that'll give you a ratio of about how much time per athlete that they spend. And what most athletes find after asking those first couple of questions is does that match up with their expectations? If I expect a coach to do A, B, and C, are they going to have enough time to do that? And so by starting there, by getting some of like the curtain peeled back on like what coaching actually is, I think that that serves these new incoming athletes, whether they've had a coach or not, to start to start to figure out the whole landscape. And it also helps them figure out what they want out of the coach athlete relationship, because when you ask those peel behind the curtain questions, you don't always know what you want, especially for athletes that have never had a coach. You don't know what you don't know. But by going through that process, it starts to help the athlete work that out in their own mind.
Yeah, that's really great stuff. I know with my coach, she's kind of a drill sergeant sort of coach, and then I told and I was fine. I just wanted somebody to tell me and not like, pay too much attention to me. And then I told my girlfriend, "Oh, she's great." And it just didn't work for her. And so that it helped direct her to another one. But I had, at that time I had no idea, what I would need, and I got lucky that I chose the right person. That's really
Well,
good.
so Dominic, who's our athlete services director, and just to give the listeners a little bit of context on this, Dominic will match up anywhere between like 50 and 100 athletes with coaches every single month. And I think he's the only person on the planet that has that much experience doing that in this context. I mean, he really is a domain expert in this process. He will always one of the standard questions that he will ask incoming athletes is, do you want a cheerleader or do you want a drill sergeant? And he says half the times the athletes know the answer to that question. Like, yeah, I absolutely need the drill sergeant, or I absolutely need the cheerleader. But the other half, when they don't know the answer to it, the question serves as a catalyst to do what I mentioned earlier in having the athlete figure out what they want out of the relationship. So there is a very real, like, not it's very rare. And I've mentored a lot of coaches. I've mentored hundreds of coaches and managed hundreds of coaches. It's very rare that you have the coach that can flip flop between those roles and do them equally well. There's going to be some proficiency of drill sergeant and cheerleader amongst coaches, but they're usually not equal and at an extremely proficient level. So those types of things are things that athletes should absolutely flush out from the get-go. And the only way, or not the only way, but a big way that you can flush those things out is just start asking the questions, because it helps you formulate what you want in your own mind.
Where do you think you are? Are you drill sergeant or are you cheerleader?
Uh, I'm gonna shamelessly say that I can do a little bit of both. I used to be more of a cheerleader when I was a younger coach, and I think a lot of that was just based out of like my own like coaching insecurity and not kind of like knowing, like just not knowing the sport well enough or being experienced or whatever. And so the way I overcame that was just with a lot of enthusiasm. And then since then I've been able to like have this kind of equal hand of, I know when to press and I know when to give compassion. I wouldn't say I'm so much of a cheerleader, but more of more compassionate would be that side of me that they can kind of come out every once in a while.
I can see that. That's what I would have pegged you as.
The compassionate one or Jill Sargent one.
A
No, it's
compassionate
right
drill
in the
sergeant.
middle. I didn't think that you could be named one or the other. I really felt that you have both qualities.
It's hard, and once again, I've been very fortunate in my coaching career, and one of the fortunate pieces of that is I've taken a management and mentorship role with a lot of our coaches that come on board, and that process has made me better, because it's this whole like learn one, do one, teach one, right, which you hear a lot in education. When you finally get to the stage where you can teach one, that makes you immensely better at the do one part of it. So do one would be actually working with athletes. So by teaching other coaches on how to be good coaches, how to make them well-rounded, how to get them to the point where they can be both the drill sergeant and the cheerleader, by bringing people through that process, it makes you better at that process as well, because you have to know 100 times more about how that process works in order to relay that and communicate that to another person and have them get better at it.
Do you have a coach or do you self-coach yourself?
I have coached myself, and I get this question a lot, and I used to kind of be like embarrassed about it because it seems like hypocritical. But the fact of the matter is since I'm the head of CTS ultra running, right? I always feel that it's unfair to put another one of our coaches in that position, because heaven forbid if I get injured or if I underperform or something like that, and the spotlight is kind of like so bright on that. I just don't want it, it's just like I said, it's just not fair. It wouldn't be fair for another one of our coaches to do that. I might be able to do that with one of our like super senior level coaches in another area and just kind of like keep it under the radar somehow. But yeah, it's just I've thought I think about that every single year. It's like, do I want another one of our coaches to coach me? And I keep coming back to the fact that it's an untenable position to put that coach in.
And you talked about being a process-driven athlete. I think that's perfect for being able to coach yourself as well, because you can, some people just have to do everything, and you enjoy the process and see the process and can write it out and probably aren't going to get anxious and do too much.
Yeah, and I've been through it for however long I've been doing this for, so I kind of like I know it works, I know it doesn't. I change a couple of things every year just to kind of tinker with it. I do some self experimenting with, things, whether it's nutrition or training or whatever, just to see how it feels on me, and not to say that I would 100% pass that on to somebody else. Like, it worked for me, it's going to work for you, but just as a part of the whole growth process. So that's just another reason I like to do a little bit, not a lot, a little bit of like self experimentation with training procedures and protocols.
So I personally love all the FKTs this year, and I think that there's something really special about people staying motivated in a non-race atmosphere. Do you think that we're going to start to see an increase in FKTs?
I hope so. And let me paint that picture a little bit more broadly. So there have been a lot of like FKTs and personal projects, and so we say like alternative race formats, like virtual race formats and last man standing formats, and run across Tennessee virtual formats and things like that. I think that all of those long term are extremely good for the sport, because trail running has way too much demand and not enough supply, and that's only going to continue to be the case because the mass participation types of events, the big marathons and things like that, they're going to take longer to boot back up. Trail running is going to be first on the market from a running, triathlon, endurance perspective, because we have small fields. We have 1 or 200 person fields. We can socially distance. We can put in procedures and protocols to kind of keep everybody safe. And the road running crowd and the marathon crowd and the shorter distance crowd, they're eventually going to look for outlets, and they're going to naturally be drawn into trail running, which increases the demand side even more. And it just becomes another point. It just, all of these alternative race formats and alternative personal project formats and things like that, it just creates another avenue to satiate that demand that keeps people engaged in the sport. So I very deeply and sincerely hope that we see more athletes, elite and not elite alike, take on things that are outside of this normal. I'm going to put a bib on, there's a start line and finish line and chip timing, and I know I'm going to get, goose at the aid station or whatever. I hope that athletes take on a little bit more of these alternative formats, because I think it's healthy for the sport, because we're going to have we already do, we're going to have a problem growing.
Yeah, I agree. We're helping somebody this at the end. It's Coach Steph. She's local here, and she's going for an FKT. And I don't know if there is an FKT on it, but it's the North Country Trail in Wisconsin at the end of this month. And whatever she does will be great, because she's planned a route, and she's going to test her endurance, see what happened, and she'll have us all cheering for her.
Well, and I think the elite athletes that are really putting themselves out there, like Courtney just got off the Colorado Trail, didn't end well for her, but she went out and tried to freaking do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Brina Stanley, who just set an incredible time out on the Nolan's route. The more people see the elite athletes do those types of things, the more inspired they will be to do their own stuff. And so once again, I just think that COVID has forced us into this position. They forced our hand because there's no other outlet. But I hope that we as a community really learn from it and are able to like engage across all of these different platforms and find value and fun and camaraderie and challenge through all these different things, because it's a big world to explore. We don't have to be limited by, I know you're a race director, but you probably feel the same way. We don't have to be limited by the traditional races and the way that they're formatted. And I think this is opinion that I've held for a while. I think that ultimately, if that's what we're limited to, is this traditional race format that we've really borrowed from road running and from marathoning. If we're limited to that, the enthusiasm and the growth and the health of the sport is always going to be capped, because there's only so many races that you can put on of 200 people throughout the weekend. It's not scalable.
Yeah, I mean, I got into trail race directing because I love race running on trails and finding out what you can do. And so bringing them to a race was a great reason for that. But I also just absolutely love the FKTs because that inspires me as an athlete. It makes me think, man, what could I do if I won't get an FKT, but what could I do if I tried to pick this point to this point and just see what the best I can do is. So that's what we want to do as a race director, as a fellow trail runner in the sport. Is
Yeah,
there it? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just said that's cool. We had a lot of athletes do that this year. They might not have the FKT on whatever route they did, but they're going to go push themselves as hard as they can, and they had a good time with it. So I think that all of that is really positive.
What routes are out there that would be great ideas for FKTs for people?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm a homer. I live in Colorado now, so Colorado Trail is obviously a good one. The Nolan's line is a good one. There's this really good loop around the Collegiate Peaks. That's a good one as well. There's a ton of good lines in the San Juans, where you could link up a bunch of 14ers. That's where the Hard Rock course is. But going back to my kind of original point, and this is something that one of the pioneers of FKTs, Buzz Burrell, will say. Well, I think I'm probably stealing this from him, so I'll give him credit for it. Is you're really only limited by your imagination. I mean, you could really do anything. I mean, it could be the FKT of your 4 mile training run around your house, or a standard loop that you do all the time. You just want to try to run it as hard as you can. If you really take that approach to it, that you're limited only by your imagination, it just opens up this whole like world of possibilities. And also, you can more easily find things that you were inspired by. If you're not looking at some of like the standard lines, the classic lines and things like that as the only way to do an FKT, you can truly say, you know what, this is really cool to me. It's from here to here to here to here. And great. If that's what's meaningful to you, go for it. You're going to be super successful at it. You're going to have a fun time doing it, and likely run really fast along the way.
Crystal and I, we always like a good road trip. And you kind of talked about this. You're from Colorado, but we always want everybody we talk to, we want to find out if we come visit your neighborhood, where should we go run? What trails should we check out? What's our bucket list?
Oh, well, you've got to check out the incline, of course. It's
Oh,
close.
yes.
Oh gosh. It's been this total disaster with the Manitou City Councils. Manitou's a little town that where the incline resides. It's this really weird thing where it's in Manitou, but the city of Colorado Springs manages it kind of like one of the parks. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that because I'll get all pissed off. You got to, if the incline's open, come and do the incline. I'm very active with that. I've been on the board of the 501c that manages that for ever since it was illegal, and it became legalized. So I'm always a homer for that thing. But if you get the chance to come and run with me, I will take you out in the Cheyenne Canyon area where we hold all of our camps, and the trails there are just phenomenal. You can go all the way around Pikes Peak, literally from my doorstep. It's a 75-mile run. I did that like earlier this year, once again because of COVID, and I had the time to finally like piece it together. But the trails are literally endless. I have lived here for 20 years, and every single year I have run at least one new trail to me. And it's not for lack of trying. It's not like I save them up and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I gotta save this one for next year. There's just so much trail inventory here, and you can get so many places that it really is one of the unheralded trail running areas of the entire country.
Well, speaking of your camp, that house that you have people stay at, and it looks all fantastic. We want to know more about that. Make this a commercial for it because I think people are interested in it, and I know you can be shy about that, but we want to do it. So tell people how we do this.
Well, so I've had a camp here in Colorado Springs, Colorado for like the last several years, and it started out as a private camp that I did for a couple of my athletes that asked me. They're like, "Hey, we want to do a training camp. Why don't we come and we train with you?" And I said, "Okay." So I designed the camp and things like that, and I took that format and I basically turned it into a group camp. And just like the experience that I had with trying to convince people that coaching was a thing, this camp thing kind of went the same way. Where the first year it was like three of my athletes that I had to beg to like to come to the camp, and the next year was five, and the next year was seven, and now we sell out with 50 people every year. I only have it open for a day before it sells out. It's awesome. We start and end all of the runs from my doorstep. So everybody comes into my house. My lovely wife who puts up with this every year, we take all of our furniture out and we turn our house into like an athlete house for the weekend. We have all the meals here. We have great food that's catered from Rad Real Athlete Diets up in Boulder. They work with a lot of the endurance athletes along the Front Range. Started and end all the runs at my house, and kind of the capstone of the whole experience is this 50K that starts and ends at my house and goes over Mount Rosa, which is just a spectacular 11,100 or 11,500 foot peak with 360-degree panoramic views. You can see all the way out into Kansas. You can see Pikes Peak. You can see the Sawatch Range. It really and once again, you start from the doorstep and go and do it. So anyway, it's a cool experience. We have athletes of all different types, all the way from my Leadville athlete that I mentioned earlier to invite a lot of my elite athletes to the camp as well. And it's my favorite event of the year. We do it over Memorial Day weekend, which I was really nervous about doing because didn't want to like stomp on the Western States 100 training camp or anything like that, but people love it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to that. I had to cancel them this year. It was a super bummer, but it's an awesome camp. And yeah, if people want to go check it out, once we get our camps back up and booted, you can't even find them now because we've got them all shut down. Once we get them back up and running, come on out. We'd love to have you.
Oh yeah, that sounds great, Crystal. What do you think of road trip out there?
Oh, yeah, that sounds amazing. Sign me up.
So, do you have anything that you have going on that you want to talk about right now? And we have some questions for the end, but I'm just wondering if there is something that is important to you right now that we haven't covered.
Well, in having like worked with a lot of athletes through this pandemic, I think the one thing that people can keep in mind is that you when you're training, you still need to do things that are genuine and inspirational to you. You can only run this like, okay, I'm going to do it because it's there. You can only run that trick out so many times before the magic of it is completely gone. And when you do start to burn that candle too much, it can actually be a negative for next year and the year after that, because you've burnt all of these matches training and doing something that is really not that meaningful to you. And that's not an infinite well. that's a very finite resource that you have. Motivation is not infinite. It is absolutely finite. And if you burn it on things that you're really not that enthusiastic about, you're better off just, as I mentioned earlier, taking 10% of your training off the table and just like chilling out and having fun and not really, like worrying about things until those more motivating things roll around.
That's great. So we always end our show with something called the Ornery Mule Stubborn Five. So it's 5 questions, and you got to answer them really ornery, like just as ornery
Oh,
as you
but it's
can.
can be the old curmudgeon.
So, number 1, what is the longest race that you have ever completed?
Oh, it's a Tour de Géant. I did it last year. So freaking hard. 330K through the Italian Alps, and yeah, it was hard. It was awesome though. I feel really, this is the non-honorary part. I feel really fortunate that I was able to get into that race and complete it because it is so magnificent.
Well, you could be stubborn too, so it took some stubbornness to get through
Oh yeah,
that.
it took a lot of everything. It took a lot of everything. Put it that way.
And number 2, what was your first pair of running shoes?
Oh, maybe the Nike Triax. That's super old school. My grandfather um owned a shoe store, a series of shoe stores in Dallas, Texas. And so when I was growing up, I always got shoes for free, but it was a dress shoe store. And they knew whenever a pair of athletic shoes came in, whether a pair of running shoes or basketball shoes, 'cause I played a lot of basketball as I was a kid, they just put them aside for me. They had no business in this dress shoe store. Somehow I ordered them and they didn't say for me. It might have been the Nike Trax was my first pair of training shoes.
So, number 3 is what's an upcoming challenge that you're looking forward to?
I am gonna get the Nolan's line done. I've been unsuccessful twice, and it is irritating the bejesus out of me that I've failed at this twice, both for really bad reasons. So yeah, I just got back from Vermont. I'm probably gonna spend another week here, like getting some stuff together, and I'm gonna pick a good weather window next week or the week after that and go and try to get it done. I've just got it. I've got the third time has to be the charm. It is irritating the crap out of me that this is still hanging over my head.
Yeah, I imagine like thunderstorms and stuff could be a major problem in that.
Yeah, I mean, if you get there's the electrical storms are the showstoppers. One year we were just too slow. There's no other excuse. I went out in a group of 3 people, and the 3 of us collected. The thing with doing these things with climbing partners is you're only going as fast as your slowest person, and so it's just not a good idea to go out with 2 or 3 people because you're always going as fast as the slowest person. And if all 2 or 3 of you aren't really good, you just don't have enough time to finish it. So the first year we were just too slow and just kind of being rookies. I did it earlier in the summer with another climbing partner, and we were not fast enough again. And so I'm gonna go out there by myself, just me and my wife. My wife's gonna crew me, and I'm gonna go get it done because it's irritating the crap out of me.
Well, you'll get it. Good luck on that. And then number 4 is who was the biggest influence in your life?
Well, overall, it has to be my mother. My good friends are rolling their eyes right now because they know what I'm gonna say. But so my mother's been an elected official for, oh my goodness, 25 years now at various levels. Local level. She was on the Dallas City Council for 8 years, and then she was in the state legislature for several years. And I have I have a, an affectionate side towards politics. I really like the theater of it. I don't ever want to run for office or anything like that, but I do like the theater around the policy, and so I keep involved in it. And I always really admired my mother when she was in these political positions, that she could always get stuff done. She could always bring people into a room together and get them to compromise and get stuff done. And I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I can go back there and take a tour of the city and see countless plaques where her name is on, it. This bridge was done, in cooperation with the city council member ABCD, Linda Koop is her name. This community center was done in conjunction with Linda Koop. This bike path was done in conjunction with Linda Koop. I can just and that signifies her commitment to her constituents, and that impacted me as a coach a lot, because I kind of view my role, my constituents being my athletes, and I'm here to serve them. And so I've patterned a lot of this like service-based attitude in my coaching career around her service-based public service that I got to witness when I was a teenager, and now she's still doing it at the freaking ripe age of 70 years old. So he's got to be my mother. I'm a mama's boy.
Oh, I love that.
That's nice.
Okay, so our fifth one is a favorite treat for a job well done.
Ice cream.
Favorite flavor.
There's this there's a really awesome ice cream shop in downtown Colorado Springs called Josh and John's. It's like super dense, really high calorie, a bazillion % milk fat type of ice cream. It's impossible if you get the pints. You have to be a hardy individual just to scoop it out. Like, that's how dense it is. And I like the salted peanut butter cup flavor.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We would love for you to come out here and visit us if you're coming through. If you need a race, we'll take good care of you. Kettle Moraine 100. I know it's close to Western States, but that would be a good one. If you want a flat and fast one, we got Hennepin, and we're adding a new one next year called Midwest States 100, and it is in Chequamegon National Forest, a very rugged part of upper Wisconsin.
I need to do more racing out there. I'm pretty well versed on both coasts and the mountain regions, Colorado and Utah. But yeah, getting in the Midwest is kind of for whatever reason, my travels have not taken me out there all too often, although I've been out there a lot for other projects. But yeah, something on my list, and definitely Kettle Moraine has been something on my list for quite a while. So yeah.
Yeah, next year will be the 25-year anniversary. So it should have been this year. We postponed it. Then we just had to cancel the postponement date. When we postponed it, I thought there was for sure it would be happening in September. This wouldn't still be around, but it's in June.
Everybody else, right? You and everybody else was like, we'll just do it in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thank you so much, Jason. We really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, and good luck on your climb. We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, I'll need all the love. But I appreciate it. This was really fun.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye. Bye, everybody.